All right, DJ, my friend, it's all you.
All right, welcome. Sorry we got in here a little late. We've been having some technical difficulties, and we're already kind of moving sluggish because Nancy was nice enough to make us all kinds of campfire food. So hopefully you've enjoyed some of these Zooms so far, and you've learned a lot. And I'm happy to talk with y'all for the next hour or so. Before we get started, my name is DJ Garland. I work for Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm an educator here in the first district, way over here in western Kentucky. I've been fly fishing for a long time, and I forgot to mention this in the last Zoom I did. A little bit about my background. I got started fly fishing, I guess, probably high school age. What would happen is every single year, my granddad would take me for 1 week in October, and we'd go down to Arkansas, which is about a 5-hour drive from where we're at now, and we would go trout fishing. And it was so cool to be down there. It was a beautiful place. Water's crystal clear, and you can see all these fish swimming around, and it was great. We'd catch lots of fish every time we'd go. But one or two times every time we'd go down there, we'd see somebody fly fish. It was always so cool. It's okay. We've got some behind the scenes going on. It's pretty cool. But no, it would be so cool to see these guys wading in the water, whipping these rods back and forth, and seeing like 20 feet of line just dangling through the air, and they could deliver that little bitty lure exactly where they wanted it to. So started fly fishing, I guess, in high school, probably sophomore year of high school, and I just kept on at it, and hopefully I can share some of my experiences with you and get you as addicted as I am, because I mean, this fly fishing, there's a lot of misconceptions about it. It used to be the old white rich guy sport, okay, and it was only for the people with mustaches, So that's not what it is today. Anybody can do it. It's a really lazy way of fishing. I've taught Nancy, who you talked to a little bit ago, and just 2 sessions, I think, so far, and she's already got her cast down. But it does take some patience. A lot of people, they see fly fishermen, they're whipping these rods back and forth, the lines are going everywhere, and they think it's something that they just gotta do really fast. It's not. It's really, really lazy. It's really easy to learn, and like when I started in high school, it's pretty cheap to get into. If you can afford to go to any of the box stores and buy a spinning rod or a bait casting rod that you would use for bass fishing, you can afford to get into fly fishing. It's not that expensive either. I started with like a little 9-foot Shakespeare Walmart special, Kmart special. And it came with everything you needed for the rod, the reel, and even a few flies to go along with it. And I think back then it cost me like $30 for my first fly rod, and that was pretty cheap. Now they're a little more expensive, but they're not unreasonable. You can go to yard sales, you can go to mom and pop stores, and you can probably pick up a combo kit for less than $50. So that would include your rod, your reel, your line, and a few flies. So everything you would need to go to your local place and catch some fish. Now, I understand that there's some of y'all that are from Kentucky, but I have like a couple of y'all from like Florida and Alabama that I've seen. So it's not just a Kentucky thing. You can do fly fishing in saltwater, freshwater. You can do it in ponds, rivers, lakes. If there is a fish in water, you can catch it probably with a fly rod. And when I got into the sport and I started really liking it is because we're using these really, really tiny flies that you can, fit like 10 of them on your fingernail. and we're catching like really big trout. But you don't have to catch trout. You can catch sharks. You can catch blue marlin. You can catch redfish in the saltwater. One of you from Florida, you're close to snook and all these saltwater species you can catch by fly fishing. Here in Kentucky, if it swims in the water and you can catch it with a regular rod and reel, you can catch it with a fly rod too. So want to get those misconceptions out of the way. I'm sure there will be some that I'll think of here in a little bit, but those are the big ones. It's really easy to do. Don't spend a lot of money starting out, and you can fish for just about anything. If it swims in the water, you can probably catch it on a fly rod. Because all we're doing is just like any other fishing. We are trying to put something in front of a fish that looks like food. If you can do that, you'll be really good at fly fishing. So when we get started in fly fishing, we're going to need a few things. When I first got told that, or asked to do this class, Olivia asked me to type up something to go with it. So hopefully y'all read the little article I wrote about a couple things that you will need. We're going to quickly go over some of that stuff. Some of it's very simple. Some of it can be complicated. So hopefully we'll clear some of that up. If you have any questions along the way, just type it in the chat box. And Nancy, just stop me there. And when they have a question, that way I can answer it. I'm kind of like Courtney is. I get a question in my head, and I'm like, oh, I really need to ask this. I'll ask them later, and then I'll remember 3 weeks from now. So if you have a question, stop me, and we'll talk about it. But the first things first, the first thing we're going to talk about, the first thing you will need to start fly fishing is a rod. So a rod. And a fly rod is different. There's some things you need to know that are really different compared to them versus a bait casting rod or a spinning rod. First thing you'll need to know is they come in what we call weights. And when you see it abbreviated, weights is always going to look like that. But fly rods come in weights all the way from a 1 weight to maybe even like a 15 weight in the saltwater. You don't have to worry about any of this. Don't worry about that. If you are starting out and you are in fresh water or even in salt water, 90% of all your fishing is going to be with either a 4 weight to a 6 weight. And what that means is most of the things you'll be throwing, those flies, are pretty small. Okay, they're made to imitate things that are in the water. So anything smaller than your fingernail, all the way up to something that maybe an inch long, okay, can be thrown on a 4 to 6 weight. So most time when we're fishing, that's what we want to start off with. It would be a really specialty rod. You'd have to have a reason, give me a reason why you would need anything smaller than a 4 weight or bigger than a 6 weight for most of your fishing. Now, there are going to be some flies that I'll show you after a while that are like the size of a dollar bill. We wouldn't be able to throw that on these, but that's pretty special. Most of you starting out, you may be bluegill fishing, or you may be bass fishing, maybe trout fishing. You're probably going to use a 4 to 6 weight. So you go to your box store, you go to a tackle shop, and you find a fly rod that says on the side 4 to 6 weight. The second thing you might need to know is that starting out, most of our rods are 9 feet long. 9 feet. 9 feet long is pretty standard. If you can only find one that's 8'6" or 9.5 feet, those would be fine too. Just starting out somewhere around 9 foot, and that's going to get you most of your fishing situations. If you were fishing way over in eastern Kentucky, and I'm not talking about like Lexington, I'm talking about you can throw a rock into West Virginia. If you're in a really small creek and there's lots of brush around you and you were fly fishing, you might want to use one that's a little shorter. But 9 foot, 90% of your fishing, your fly fishing, is going to be with a 9-foot rod. It's just pretty standard. If you're used to bass fishing, usually your rods are like 7 foot. If you are pan fishing, you might have a rod as small as 6 foot. But for fly fishing, we're going to be trying to keep that big, heavy, colorful fly line that you've all seen up in the air, and we really do need a 9-foot rod. There might be grass around us, and we want to keep our line up above that as well. So fly rod's pretty simple. I'm going to grab one of these. Might as well get both pieces. All right, so when you get your fly rod, the first thing you're going to notice is on the box it will say what weight it is. If it's a 4, 5, 6 weight, it'll be on the box. But also right here on this part, it's probably hard to see with the camera, but right here it's going to tell you 9 foot, 5 weight. So this is a 5-weight rod. And they come in 2 pieces. All right. Now I like 2-piece rods if you are going to a place that's close by. If you're going to be fishing primarily within an hour of where you live, a 2-piece rod is fine. 2-piece rods, they are quicker to put together. This end inserts into this end, and ta-da, you line up the guides. But there is a problem with a 2-piece 9-foot rod, and that is these pieces are 4.5 feet long. That's fine if you are traveling in a car. It might be a little hard to pack this without breaking it because these rods are fragile. But if you want to go places like out west or places that you're going to need to fly to, then you're probably going to want a 4, 5-piece rod. And they all these different fly weights, 4, 5, 6, any fly rod you're going to have comes in a variety of different pieces. So if you're traveling, it's good to have 4-piece rods. Then they're only like this long, and you can carry them in your backpack, you can carry them in your carry-on. Other than that, rods are pretty simple. We're going to talk about reels and lines, especially here in a minute. That's going to be a little more confusing, but starting off, get you a 4 to 6 weight rod that's around 9 feet, and that's going to be pretty good start now. All right, so that's rods. Good thing about fly fishing is, and what will get you hooked on it when you first get your first fish on there, is if you've ever been bass fishing and use a heavy rod, you might get a good fight if it's a big fish. If you have ever caught catfish and it pulls really hard, that's great, but you're using a really thick rod. When you use a fly rod, this is really small. All right, I have caught with this fishing rod right here, I've caught fish that were 8, 9 pounds, and on this rod that feels like a shark in the ocean. I've also caught things, trout that are 4 inches. And 4-inch trout feel like 2-pound bass. So it's still a really, really nice fight, no matter what kind of fish you catch, whether it's small fish, big fish, on a fly rod, it just feels that much better. All right, so what we're going to do, we talked about rods. Rods are pretty simple. The next thing that we'll have to talk about starting out is the reels. They're pretty simple as well. We're going to pick up and go to my reels over here on the table. All right, so if you buy a fly rod, they're going to come with a reel if you buy them in a combo pack. Starting out, that's what I'd recommend. That way you don't have to try to mix and match them. But if you buy a 5-weight rod, you should buy a 5-weight reel. If you buy a 6-weight rod, you should buy a 6-weight reel. And a lot of these reels, they come in various sizes. So this one is probably good from 3-weight to 6-weight. This one probably 3 to 5-weight. And depending on the size, this one I use a lot in the saltwater when I want to throw really, really big flies. So this is a 9-weight. You can see it's much bigger
because the line's a lot thicker, it's a lot bigger. When it comes to reels, don't buy something expensive. When you go bass fishing, and if you get into that and you start to use a bait caster, they can get really expensive because there's ball bearings in them. There's different speeds you can do. With a fly reel, there's not really much to it. This is a glorified line holder. That's all a fly reel actually is for 90% of your fishing. So there is some differences. This one that I have in my hands is called a click and paw reel. So if you go inside of it, you just push a little button right here, pop this off. It's got these, you might have to zoom in. It's got these two little triangles here, okay? These little triangles are your drag system, all right? So if you're familiar with any other kind of fishing, when a fish pulls on your line, you're reeling him in, and he's pulling, dragging, you hear that little peeling off of line, that allows you to fight a fish. Now, on a fly reel, you're probably not going to be using that much. You're going to be using the rod to fight the fish. But if you engage those little triangles like I just did, you'll get the classic clicking noise, all right? There's not a lot of drag on these. If they do run your line, your fly line out and they start pulling drag, it's not a lot of resistance. So they call these a click and paw because it does click as it's pulling drag. And to put more resistance on that fish, you might use the palm of your hand to slow it down. So that's one style. Your classic fly reels from back in the 20s, they were all these types of reels. They still work. Like I said, they're basically just a glorified line holder. If you like the clicking noise, I go out there because I like hearing the water and I like being in nature and it's quiet. So I typically don't have those on. It does add some resistance to the fish because when I do turn those triangles off, that spool spins a lot easier. And if you do get a fish that really pulls your line, it will tend to overspin in here. This one is not a click and paw. It may make some noise when drag is pulled, but this drag system is a little different. This one inside obviously doesn't have those, okay? It's got this little disc right here. It's a ceramic disc, and this is what we call a disc drag. So pressure, put this back on. On the back, there's a little dial. Like on most of your big fancy reels that you may use in traditional fishing, if you tighten this down, it becomes harder to pull line out. Doesn't really matter to me if you're fishing for bass or trout or catfish, which kind of reel you use. Once you get into salt water, you'll probably want a sealed drag like this one. They're just a lot smoother than these old-fashioned ones. All right, and that's pretty much reels. Like I said, reels are not complicated. Rods are not complicated. These guys just hold line. This one, I think I bought at a box store for like 30 bucks. So I have a tendency to be really, really rough on my gear. Like when I go wading through the water, I don't really pay attention a lot of times. I'll slip and fall and I'll bang this on a rock. This one does help out a little bit because it's metal. Some of these cheaper ones, I think this one was like 10 bucks. It's made out of plastic. This one's not going to survive a lot of rocks. This one, maybe a few more hits. Again, don't go out and spend a lot of money. Buy a cheap rod for your first time. Buy a cheap reel for your first time. All right. Now we're going to talk about probably the most complicated thing in all of fly fishing, okay? And that is these lines, okay? Now, in traditional fishing, you have one line. You have your monofilament line that is on the reel. Well, in fly fishing, yeah, we think of those bright, colorful lines going through the air, and they're really thick. They're like somebody trying to throw rope. That is the fly line itself, and that's what we use to keep the fly up in the air. That's what we use to make our cast. But if you just had this on here, it would be really hard to throw this little bitty guy. All right, so we've got, let me pull some line off here very carefully. Bear with me a second. All right, so if I have this little bitty fly, and I've got this really, really thick fly line that you've all seen before, if you've seen fly fishing, I am never going to be able to get this green line into that little bitty eye on that hook. So what we need something else. On this fly reel, there are exactly 4 different kinds of line. So like I said, it's a little more complicated than fly rods and fly reels. So I can take this spool off, and you can see inside here is that white line. That white line is stuff we call backing, right? Now, backing can be bright orange, it can be white. I've seen it in lots of colors. But what that is that's extra protection. If you get a really, really big fish that's fighting you and it pulls lots and lots of line off, this fly line is only about 90 feet. So if you fight a fish for more than 30 yards, you're gonna run out of fly line. Most of the time when you're fighting fish, especially with a fly rod, you're fishing usually within 30 to 40 feet. Most of your fish that you're going to catch are that close. So you're rarely going to get to the backing. But if you have that fish of a lifetime on, that brown trout that's 24 inches long, you're going to want some backing just in case. Because if you don't have backing on here, one, it's not going to fill this reel up. But if he gets to the end, this line right here, you can break it if you pull on it. So you want that extra space, you want that extra time to fight those extra big fish. So on this reel, you start off from a bare reel, you put backing on, and then you attach it to a floating, or in our case, a floating fly line. When it comes to fly lines, backing first. Backing is pretty cheap. Even if you don't have a place you can get some backing, if you'll go to any kind of fishing store and get some braided fishing line works good for backing too. With this fly line though, if you're going to spend money in fly fishing, spend money on the fly line, okay? If you get good fly line, your cast will be better. You put that fly where you want it a lot more often if you use good fly line. Most of our fly lines today, on the box, you'll see WF. WF stands for weight forward. What that means is this line, this big, thick green line, is really long, and it looks like it's the same thickness all the way. What weight forward means is on this end, where you attach your fly down here, this end is thicker. It's going to have more weight. The weight is forward on the line. What that's going to do is going to allow you to cast a little better. You're going to be more accurate, and you're going to cast a little farther. So most of the lines you'll see is weight forward.
We have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
How much backing do you want on the reel before you add the fly line?
If you buy it at any kind of fly shop that's a good fly shop, if you buy your line there, they will usually spool it for you for free. Most reels can hold about 100 yards, and these spools come in 100 yards. Some of your smaller reels, like this one, I only have like 50 because it's a really, really small reel. What that allows you to do when you put that backing on there is, yeah, it gives you that safety net, but it also fills in your reel. If I didn't have that backing on there, my reel wouldn't be as full. And when I make a turn of this reel, it doesn't have any gears inside of it like a spinning rod does or like a bait casting reel does. So every time you turn this once, you're going to get that much fly line in. If I didn't put any backing on here and it wasn't very full, I'm going to have to turn really, really, really fast just to pick up the line. So yeah, about 100 yards. If you have a smaller reel, maybe 50 will work. If it's a really, really small reel like this one, I don't even think, it's got a little backing on there, but not much. Any place you go that that has a bunch of fly fishing stuff, they'll probably put it on there. They'll set all these reels and rods up for you as well. I forgot to mention this. Glad you actually brought that up. When you get a reel, if you are left-handed, this is a left-handed reel. If you are right-handed, this is a right-handed reel. Okay? On the inside, when you take these apart, inside there's a little metal, it's kind of like a cotter pin. If you'll pop that out, take the bearing out, flip it upside down, put it right back in, pop the clip back in, it is now a left-hand reel. I'm right-handed, so most people that are right-handed when they're fly fishing or when they're conventional fishing, they'll use that arm to make their cast, and they will actually reel with their opposite hand. So people that are right-handed casting, they'll reel with their left hand. If you are dominant with your left hand, you're going to be whipping that fly rod with your left hand. You can spin that around and you can use it as a right-handed retrieve.
Another question.
Another question.
Does fly line have memory like mono?
Does it? Yes, it does. The good thing with fly line is if you take care of it after you get done for the day, if you'll just like take a sponge, a wet sponge, and just scrape all the mud off, it'll last a really, really long time. But if you do have those curls in your line, what you can do is you can just tightly pull on this, not too hard, but you can actually stretch it out. A lot of people that have spinning rods, really bad on spinning rods, right? And I've heard everything from tie it to a pole, get all your line out, and then pull on it and stretch it all out. For fly lines, if you just do this before you start casting in the day, you'll be fine. And you don't have to go all the way back into here. As long as the first 30 feet are nice and stretched out, as long as they're kind of straight, you'll be okay. Like I said, in fly fishing, most of your fish will come in the first 30, 40 yards. You can see these guys on TV casting like 80 feet out there. They're not really fishing. They're just kind of trying to show off or something. Most of the fish, and you'll be surprised once you get into this, fish may be 5 feet away from you, you can still catch them. A lot of times when I go to streams, and I'll just sit there and watch and wait to look for fish, and I'll have somebody else come down and just tromp out in the stream, and they'll be walking over lots of fish that they could have caught that were 5 feet off the bank. So when you get there, sit down for a minute, stretch your line out, take a second, just enjoy these beautiful places that you're in. A lot of people like to get into fly fishing because they've seen movies like a river runs through it, or they see these TV shows where they're off in these exotic tropical destinations. Yeah, it's great. You're enjoying the whole experience. Yes, it's about the fish. We're actually targeting fish. But just take a second and enjoy these beautiful places that you're in. I mean, that's what got me hooked when my granddad would take me down the Red River in Arkansas. It's beautiful. I mean, that's what kept making us go year after year after year. I mean, I love living here in Western Kentucky. We have beautiful lakes. We've got gigantic rivers and swamplands. What we don't have a lot of is clear water. It's just something different, and it is beautiful. So get out there, stretch your line out, and enjoy the moment before you jump in there. All right, so back to these lines. So we're talking about backing. With this weight forward line is pretty simple. If you have a 6-weight rod, get a 6-weight line. For most of your applications, you'll need a floating fly line. This fly line is made to float on top of the water. Most of the fly lines that you will see are floating. 90% of the time, you'll be using floating line. But there are some that will say sinking line or intermediate line. That just means that when you cast it out there, it does slowly start to sink. If we're fishing in a lake that is 15 feet, I can fish for crappie on Kentucky Lake with a fly rod. It may take a second for that little bitty fly to get down there, and for that, I would want sinking line. This is going to be floating. When you go out for the first time, buy yourself some floating fly line. Just get one that matches the reel and the rod that you have. All right, now comes the confusing part. Backing simple, fly line simple. This thing that we attach our fly to is called leader. So right here, you'll notice there's a see if I can get it over here. Can you get that? There you go. So we've got a loop right here on the end of our fly line. And then on our leader material, our monofilament line, that we're going to eventually attach our fly to, we got another loop. So we got a loop-to-loop connection, and this leader material, as it goes down, gets smaller and smaller. And that is so that we can eventually, where's my fly, get this little bitty fly to actually attach to our line. So if we got it down to there, we could actually tie this on. When it comes to leaders, can you see that? It won't focus in the console. It's really tiny. When it comes to leaders, though, they're what we call tapered leaders. So they start off really, really big, and that's the big ends called the head. We'll attach it to the fly line. And then on the lead end,
Well, it looks like we got DJ frozen in time. Are you guys still able to hear me at the moment? Thumbs up.
a really, really tiny fly, like even half the size of the one you've been seeing, I may want to use 6X line. Problem is, when you get that small of a line, you tend to have really, really big fish break the line. And then if you get stuck on something, you don't plan on getting the fly back. So for right now, when you're starting out, just go and you can buy these leaders in these individual packs. Sometimes they'll come 2 to a pack. They're a little more expensive, but get a pack of 3X, a pack of 4X, and a pack of 5X, and that'll cover most of the flies that you'll use starting out. Now I said there was 4 different types of line. I got 4 different things in front of you. There is something that you'll also need called tippet. And you'll notice that this tippet says 5X as well. Well, what that means is this tippet material is not tapered. It's the same length, the same thickness all the way through. What this does is this leader goes down to a 5X. If I want to keep fishing with this leader and I want to change flies because that fly I was using didn't work, I'll have to cut that fly off and tie another one on. Well, you do that enough, or even if you break the line off, it maybe breaks up here, you want that original 9 feet away from this fly line. One, you don't want this fly to see it, or sorry, you don't want the fish to see this big heavy line. So most standard leaders are 9 feet. Get a leader length that matches your rod. So if you have a 9-foot rod, get yourself a 9-foot leader. Go ahead.
We have another question. What kind of knot do you tie to attach all of these different pieces?
Okay, we'll talk about that in just
Okay.
a second. Don't let me forget it. Though.
Okay, I won't.
So when it comes to this though, if it's 9 feet, that's great. It's going to work out real well. But as you change flies and as you break lines off, this leader is going to get shorter and shorter. So what tippet does, tippet actually extends this leader. So you tie in line to line, we would use what's called a surgeon's knot. If we weren't doing this virtually over the computer, I could show you that knot, but just in this small line with this small of tippet, it's not going to be able to show up on camera. So there are plenty of places you can go to check out a surgeon's knot. There's companies like Orvis. If you go to their website, they have all kinds of knot tying tutorials, all kinds of fly fishing tutorials. You can just go on YouTube and Google surgeon's knot, and you can figure out how to tie those individual knots. But that's the one I would use anytime I'm working with this clear leader or tippet material. We'll use a different knot called a clinch knot or an improved clinch knot when we're actually tying the fly to this line. So when you start out, you can just use a leader. But as you go and you make this leader shorter and shorter, you're going to want to buy tippet, which is a lot cheaper than buying this leader material. Tippet, same length, or sorry, same diameter all the way through. And it's just to extend our leader back to its original point. So on a reel, you've got backing, you've got fly line, you've got leader, and then you have tippet at the end. I know it's confusing. Go back and look at that article that I posted. You'll be able to go back and check it out several times. You can go on, like I said, YouTube. There's hundreds of tutorials to show you this exact system. But that's probably, if you can understand that, you can understand anything in fly fishing. It's really, really simple once you get the hang of it. You just want to try to maintain that leader length, and you want it to match up with the fly you're using. So if you have really, really big flies, you'd want to use something closer to 0x. If you're using really, really tiny flies, you're going to want to use something that's closer to 5, 6, maybe even 7x. All right, question?
So does the tippet number need to match up with the leader number?
If you are good about changing it, meaning after you tie or after you cut off maybe a foot of fly this leader off, once you go from a 9-foot leader to a 8-foot leader, if you're really good about putting another foot of 5x on, then yes, you want to stay with 5x tippet for your 5x leader. But if you're like me and you get lazy and you just keep cutting stuff off and cutting stuff off, and now you're down to this one is like a 6-foot leader, then in order to get that correct taper, because like I said, it's really, really fat on this end and it's really small on this end, you want that taper. If you don't have that taper, it's going to be really hard to control where that fly lands. You might be great at controlling where this fly line lands, but your fly itself may get all tangled up if you don't have the correct taper. So if you want to go out and you're going to be fishing primarily 5x leaders, then I would go ahead, because I'm lazy, and buy a 3x tippet, and then a 4x tippet, and a 5x tippet. If you cut off the first foot, you can just use typical 5x tippet. But if you do end up like me and you're lazy about it and you wait till it's only 6 foot left, then you might have to go from a on the end of this, you might tie on some 3x tippet, and then you might have another section tied to it that is 5x. Okay, you can skip one. I wouldn't skip more than one though. So once you get down to only 6 foot left, this may be only about a 3x tippet now. So you might get away with 5x, but you probably would be better if you tied a 4x and then another piece of 5. All right, so are there any questions on rods or reels or any of the lines that we've talked about? I know the lines are confusing. I promise you that's the most complicated thing about fly fishing. Once you get into it, though, it'll be easy. Anything? All right, so we're going to move on to the fourth thing you will need, And that's the flies themselves. So we've got all kinds of flies. Now, the whole point of using a fly, and the original reason fly fishing was invented, is because these small tribes of people, way back a long time ago, they observed fish eating. And they were coming up and splashing, and they were taking little insects off of the water. Well, back then, they had these big lines, basically ropes with hooks made out of rocks and bone. Well, they couldn't just put a bug on it that was small enough for these fish to eat. So what they eventually ended up doing is they made better hooks, and they would take these materials that they found naturally when they would go hunting, and they just tied them up there, made it something that looked like a bug, landed on top of the water, and ta-da, we invented fly fishing. So what you're doing with any kind of fishing nowadays, any kind of conventional fishing, is you're trying to make them think that what you're putting out there is food. So when it comes to fly fishing, most of the fish that you're going to catch, you're going to want to catch the big ones. And the big ones can eat big flies. But the big ones also eat small things that they grew up on. Because every single fish that you've ever seen before, when it started out as a little bitty egg. And then it hatched out, and it may be microscopic, a little fry. Well, that small little fish can only eat so big of things. So fish love to eat anything that will fit in their mouth. But when their mouths are really, really tiny, they got to start out eating small things. So every stream that you go to, there's going to be some kind of aquatic insect in it. So that's what fly fishing starts out as. You can catch really big fish on flies that you can fit 15 of them on a dime. Or most time, if you're after really, really big fish, you might want to use a bigger fly. But when we think of fly fishing, the basic fly, if you've ever seen a video, watched a movie, got on YouTube and seen fly fishing, they're probably fishing, when they're fly fishing, what we call dry fly. And that's this one way over here. So these are dry flies. And dry flies got their name because they tend to stay dry. When we fish these, this one's a mayfly imitation. If you are anywhere around our big lakes right now, there are mayflies that are hatching. Yes, I understand it's not May, but there's lots of different kinds of mayflies. And we're basically making something that imitates their food. If you can make it look like food, you're going to catch lots of fish. But dry flies, they sit on top of the water. We use floating line, we cast it out there, and our job is to make this float down the water just like a normal bug that may have landed on the water. But dry flies are going to sit on top. We've got mayflies, we got ones that look like caddis flies, and if you get really, really into fly fishing, you'll start to learn all the different bugs. But basically, they're things that you would think about fishing with conventionally. It may look like a cricket or a grasshopper, maybe a beetle, maybe an ant, anything that would fall in the water that a fish might eat, that's what they're going to go for. So those are dry flies. Most of the time when you think of fly fishing, that's probably what you think of, some fish coming up and eating something on the surface. And that's what hooks a lot of people into fly fishing. They really like fly fishing because unlike most kinds of fishing, like your bass fishing, you're using crankbait or spinnerbait, you can't see that fish actually eat the lure. Well, even if you like bass fishing, you go topwater fishing, that kind of bass fishing is usually most people's favorite because you can actually see the fish come up and eat your lure. And that's what we're doing with dry flies. When it comes to most of fly fishing, though, there's going to be a lot of times where you don't see any fish coming up to the surface. There might not be all kinds of insects on top of the water for them to eat. Unless you're really early in the morning or right before dark, there's a good chance that dry fly fishing is not going to be the best. So then we move on to what we call, if they're not dry, wet flies. Wet flies, you'll also hear them called nymphs. All these flies are things that you can tie yourself. A lot of people get into it and they really like it, and so they start learning about the insects and they start making their own flies. There's something just extra about making something that you can physically catch a fish on. So these are all things that you can make. Most of these I've made. They're really small though, because most of these insects, when they hatch out, are really small. Some are even worm shape. You can get really big insects underwater too. But then there's this one. This one, it's just a little pink dot. All right, question for the audience. What in the world would that imitate? Something a fish would normally eat. Who's gonna pop it up in the chat? What is it? What does it say?
Salmon egg.
Salmon egg, yeah, it's a fish egg. Now, it might not be a salmon egg, but every single fish I told you started out as an egg. Well, usually a brown trout's not going to eat a brown trout egg, but during the rainbow trout spawn, yeah, they'll probably eat some rainbow trout eggs. So we have imitation eggs, we have imitation bugs, we have imitation worms, just like you would use in conventional fishing if you were using a rod and reel. But those are all small. Those are all tiny, and that's great. But if you're like me, you like big fish, right? So big fish like big food, right? So when it comes to things that imitate shad or crawfish or other big fish that say a bass might eat, or even a big trout. I've gone to, some of y'all are in central Kentucky. Y'all are pretty close to Lake Cumberland. Lake Cumberland's known for its big, gigantic striper, right? And those big, gigantic striper are not going to spend their time eating all these small little bugs. So then we come to our things called streamers. So these are streamers, just imagine them as the big, chunky food that fish would love to eat. Sometimes they look like crayfish in the water, or leeches, or other big bait fish. And you'll notice that some of these are pretty big. This big fly right here, you're not going to be able to cast on a 6-weight. But all of these that you see uncovered, they can probably be cast on a 6-weight rod. The bigger the fly, the bigger, heavier line that you'll need. So if I was using any of these two on the bottom, I'd probably want to use a 7 to 9 weight fly line. But this one right here, it would be perfectly fine for me to cast it on a 5-weight. Okay, and then you're going to catch fish that are 5, 6, 7, 8 pounds on that little bitty hook. So don't let the size of the lure fool you. A lot of big fish will eat really, really tiny stuff, but sometimes we catch that bigger one, we want to get the bigger flies out there in front of their face. They're just more likely to eat something that's an easier meal for them. They spend a lot less energy on it. They're going to be a lot fatter, a lot quicker. All right, I mentioned if you really get into it and you want to eventually start tying your own lures, your own flies, you can do that with pretty little investment. Now, if you go to a fly shop and you just buy a couple flies at a time, you're going to get a lot of flies pretty quick. But those flies may be $1, $2. In some of the cases, those big ones might be $3, $4. Well, you can actually tie them yourself. So this right here is a little fly tying kit that I got at a box store one time. I think I paid like $20 for it, okay? And I have been using it for 15 years. It's just got some of the basic tying tools that you'll need. It's got a vise. Other than that, you can buy hooks for it. Buy hooks. Let me get some of this stuff out. Everything that I tied all those flies with comes out of this little box. So if you do get into tying it, you'll start out with a hook and some thread. If you are in America, usually they'll go by these numbers right here. 210 means this stuff's pretty thick. If I was tying those big streamer patterns, that's probably what I'd use. If I was tying those small dry flies, I might want to use something that says 70, okay? 70 is going to be your thinner lines. It's not going to build up as much on those really, really tiny hooks. So tiny hooks, use the smaller number. Bigger hooks, use the bigger number. All right, back to those for a second. Those wet flies. So as I said earlier, I talked to you about hook sizes. When we do this one right here, it's about the size of a normal grasshopper. This is on a size 7 hook. So 7 hooks, pretty big. When you go smaller in hook size, the number on the hook becomes bigger. So this one is a 7, and I put it next to this one over here, which is much smaller. This is like a size 14 or a size 16. A lot smaller. Bigger number on the hook means it's a smaller hook. Small number on a hook means it's a really big hook. Those, these big streamers over here are tied on number 2 hooks. So really, really big hook, if you can see it right there, compared to those hooks on the smaller flies. All right, is there any questions about flies before we move on? Fly tying or anything that we've talked about so far?
Let's check it out real quick. So we had a question a little bit earlier. Does the leader and tippet sync?
The leader and the tippet does sync, but not very well. If you're using a monofilament line, a monofilament leader and tippet, they're going to tend to stay on top of the water. The only problem is after a little while, this fly will get drenched, it will get soaking wet, and it will slowly start to pull down in the water column. There's ways that we're going to fix that here in just a second, but yes, for the most part, your tippet and your leader does float only because of the big fly line that you have attached to it. All right, hope that answers that.
All right, and then another question. So if you're using one size of line and you want to change your, to a different fly, would you have to also change lines?
The fly line itself, or you're talking about the leader? The leader you might have to change, but the fly line itself, for the most part, if you are fishing for a bass or trout or crappie or anything you're probably going to fish for around here, even catfish, I probably wouldn't change the fly line itself. You will have to change the leader depending on how big or how small the fly is. The smaller the fly that you're going to use, the bigger X leader that you'll use. So if I'm using those small little nymphs, I'm going to use something in the 5X range, 4, 5X. If I'm using the big hopper that you saw, this little grasshopper right here on the 7, then I would probably use a 3X tippet. So, big flies, smaller X on the tippet. But no, you don't have to change out the fly line itself. If I do want to throw those really, really big streamers, say I'm fishing for striped bass or largemouth bass, I'll be using those big streamers. I will probably just carry a bigger, like 9-weight rod around with me, either in the boat if I'm in a boat, or I'll just carry an extra 9-weight rod around with me. And I do that by having this nice little backpack, right? So I've got rod tubes back there for carrying the rod, and then can't go fishing, fly fishing without my pack. I'm one of those people that wants to be prepared for everything. A lot of people can do fly fishing with a lot less gear. You don't need all this. I'm just a fly junkie, and I tie my own flies, so I've got billions. So I never have to worry about losing a fly. I'll just tie another one. But when it comes to gear, so we talked about flies, we talked about rod, talked about reel, talked about lines. There is a few other little simple things you might need. No fly fisherman and no fisherman in general should go without a pair of nippers. Okay, these are just toenail clippers that I stole from my wife's bathroom. So don't let her know that. But we use this because we don't want to be biting the line with our teeth. Got another question?
And does all this gear, do you carry it in the water with you, DJ?
I'm usually, like I said, lazy, and I'll just take this off. It's supposed to be a backpack. It's a nice little sling pack. But if you see old traditional fly fishermen, you used to wear the big vest and the hats that had the flies on them. We've replaced that with backpacks now. You can make this lightweight, but what I end up doing is I'll wear this for like the first 20 minutes I'm there, and then I'll get to a spot that I want to fish, and then I'll unsnap this and leave it on the bank. So you don't have to carry this much. You can carry just a little box of flies in your pocket, and you'll probably be good. But you'll definitely want some nippers. Don't use your teeth. You will ruin your teeth if you do not use nippers, okay? Don't use your teeth to cut line. In fly fishing, you're going to be cutting line a lot, so don't use your teeth. So you'll need that, and you'll need these right here. These are forceps. These are just little bitty tweezers. These hooks, like I said, are, you know, the size of your pinky fingernail. When you've got a big fish and you're trying to grab a hold of him and get that little bitty hook out, having a pair of these is really great. And if you can find some that have these little hooks on them, so when you close them, it locks, it really, really, really helps out a lot. So you get that fish that's moving, he's wiggling in your hands, it's going to pop that hook out really, really easily if you have some of these locking tweezers, pliers, forceps. Third thing that I would carry along with me, if you're going to use a lot of dry flies, this stuff is called dry fly floatant. What it does is, this is a little oil. Sometimes they have powders of them. It's a little bitty oil that you put on your dry flies and rub them into your dry flies before you start fishing. When you put that on the water, if you don't put that dry fly floating on it, eventually after 15 minutes or so, it'll get so waterlogged that it won't stay on the surface anymore. We want to see that fish come up and eat it. We want it to sit on top of the water. Put some of that dry fly floating on there, and it'll actually extend the life of your dry fly and keep it on top for a lot longer. If I put that on there and I get even a couple fish drown it underwater because they're swimming around with it in their mouth, I can usually, even after catching a fish, can still make it float if you use some dry fly float. Let's see, what else do we need? Okay. A lot of good reasons to have a bag like this. So you got all your fly boxes you can throw in there. You've got all kinds of your flies in there. So that's why I like to carry a backpack, because I literally have like a dozen of these boxes in here. But I also got a little pouch that has these other things in it. So these right here, all this you see right here, are called strike indicators, okay? Back when it was just a rich person's sport, they got this big fancy name and they wanted to be different than anybody else. So they came up with this word called indicators to call these bobbers, okay? These are bobbers. If you're really, really fancy in fly fishing, you would call them indicators, but most of the world still calls them bobbers. And a lot of them, like these, actually look like bobbers. There's a brand out there called Thingamabobber, and they still use the bobber name. Some of them you can use, and these unscrew right here. It's got this little gap right here. You'd put your leader in there, and you'd screw it back down. And the reason that we would use these is when we're nymph fishing, if we know that fish is right on the bottom and we're fishing maybe a stream that's 3 feet deep. Well, I can set this 3 feet up my leader, and then I know that fly, for the most part, is right up off the bottom at 3 feet. I can put that fly right in front of the fish's nose because I have a bobber. It works exactly the same way as a traditional bobber. They come in styles. They got this bobber style. They've got this one that you run through your leader and then you put the toothpick in it to keep it in place. Or go, and I don't really like these because once you use one, then you just have to throw away. These are little styrofoam sticky pads. So once you stick it on there, that's where it is. So if you go to further down a creek or further down the bank on a lake and the water gets deeper and those fish are deeper, then you'd have to take this off and then put another one on. So it's a lot easier just to get one of these. The only reason I still have these is because if I am dry fly fishing or using a really, really tiny size 18 or 20 nymph or wet fly, I'll use these because when it hits the water, it doesn't make a big commotion. If I'm using this big one, there's going to be a big kerthud, like an acorn falling in the water if I'm using this. If I'm using this, there's barely any ripple on the water. So just if you have really, really spooky fish are used to seeing a lot of anglers, I might use these. All right. So those are the few basic things you'll need.
What
Question.
about wearing waders? So would there be any safety issues possibly?
Using waders.
Yes, wearing waders.
If you are using waders in fly fishing around here in Kentucky, because we have this nice temperate climate, it's always warm. What I will do is most of the time I will just wet wade. Like I'll put on a pair of swimming trunks and some old shoes, and most of the places you go in Kentucky, you'll be fine. If you really get into sport, you really want to go trout fishing because you've seen it on TV all the time, we've got some pretty good blue water streams here in Kentucky too. Most notably is the Cumberland Tailwaters. It's crystal clear. It's a beautiful place. But that water in the Cumberland River coming out of Lake Cumberland is really, really cold. It comes from the bottom of the lake, and when they pull it off into the tailwaters, it's really, really cold. You're not going to want to just go out there in some swimming trunks. So if you do want to wear some waders, I will only use them when I go to places that have really, really cold water. They have neoprene waders that are really, really thick. If you go duck hunting and you're out there in the winter in January and it's freezing cold, you'll want the neoprene waders. But if you're trying to fly fish in a creek in July, you're probably not going to want to wear those big, thick waders. Yeah, I don't have any of my waders here with me today. Actually, I lied. They're way up in my truck. But on your waders, they'll have a belt to keep it nice and tight. Anytime you're going to be in the water wading, first tell somebody where you're going. Whether you're hunting, fishing, just for safety reasons, tell someone where you're going. Most of the time when you're wading though, if you get above your chest, above your waist, that water's, especially if it's moving, if you're in a river system or a creek system, becomes pretty dangerous and pretty hard to walk anyways. You're going to end up wet whether you're wearing waders or not because you're probably going to fall over. So when you do go wading, don't try to go up to your chest, even if you can. So if I was making recommendations on waders, I would never, ever, ever buy a pair of waders if I couldn't try them on first. Different brands, they come in different sizes. If you're going to a place where you think you'll need waders, just go to a local place that sells waders and try a few on. If you're going to be in cold water a lot in the winter, you'll want neoprene waders. If not, they have lightweight breathable waders that work really, really well. So if you're going to need waders and you think you're going to need waders, go to wherever you're going to buy them and try them on first. Get their opinion on what you might need for the area. All right.
Hey, DJ.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you mention something about, or talk a little bit about like the quick releases on them? I think one concern was that if you were wearing waders and fell and they fill it with water, that could be a safety issue.
Right. If you fall and you fall back, there's always two clips right here and there's always a clip at your belt. If you're wearing the belt one, that's going to keep most of the water out. Most people could handle, as long as that water doesn't get all the way down to your boots, most people that are going to be around the water, if you're confident about it, as long as it's not getting completely under it. But yes, most of your waders will have a clip here, clip here. As soon as you fall, you can unclip them. You can get out of your waders fairly quickly. If you are not comfortable being around water and swift water, if you're not a confident person around that, I would just recommend not wading. Okay, that's going to keep you the safest. And if you were going to wade, I would do it, during a warmer season. We have a lot of people that go duck hunting and they're just not safe about it. If you're going to be in a boat, I wouldn't recommend wearing waders. Okay. If you are in a boat and you're going to drive down to a place where you are going to wade, do not put your waders on until you get out of the boat on the bank. That's when you would put your waders on. And I know this doesn't have anything to do with fly fishing, but if you are duck hunting and you're hunting somewhere and you're driving a boat back and forth, or you get back in the boat, take your waders off, and then get in the boat and then drive back to your truck. All right.
Hey, we got a couple more questions. You want to answer a couple right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So with all that wading and possibly not wearing the waders, what about creepy crawlies like leeches? Is that a concern?
Not here in Kentucky. It's not a big concern. In Kentucky, like where we're at right now, we do have leeches. If you get one, they're not like what you would think in the Amazon. They're not like 5 inches long. Suck all your blood away. Most places, that have leeches are either really, really crystal clear water and they're not after you, they're after fish and other things that are in the water. Usually leeches aren't a big problem. If you do get them, most of them in Kentucky, you just pull right off. Don't worry about creepy crawlies.
And
Another good thing, if you're fishing really, really cold water, I know some of you might be a little nervous about snakes and stuff. Well, guess what? Snakes don't like cold water. So don't have to worry about those either.
bonus there. What about maybe life jackets? Wearing a life jacket, if especially around that moving water, and the inflatable ones that you might be able to wear, they're small too.
Right. Those Type 5s, they're inflatables, and make sure if you're going to be wading, wear one of those life jackets. You don't have to wear the big neoprene vest ones that you see, like the ski vest. You don't have to wear those. You don't need to be wearing the bright orange Type 2s. Go to any of your box stores, any place that sells life jackets, and get those inflatable Type 5s. Basically, if they get wet, if you fall over, they're going to automatically inflate. But when you do buy one, if you're going to buy one online, say you're going to Amazon, make sure in the description they say U.S. Coast Guard approved, okay? Don't trust anything that doesn't say that. On those self-inflatables, it'll also have a gauge on there to tell you if it's good or not, okay? And it probably wouldn't hurt to test it out, okay? Basically, they have little CO2 cartridges. You just screw them into the life vest, and you can pull on a tab, and it should inflate. If it doesn't, take it back, get you a new one. So anytime you're around water, if you're in a boat, you have to have one on. It's a law in the state of Kentucky. Got to be wearing a life jacket when you're on the water. But yeah, even if you're wading, wear one of those little life jackets. They don't weigh anything. It's not those big bulky ones you would think when you usually think life jackets. All right.
All right, couple more here real quick. What do you think about fly fishing from a boat?
I like fly fishing from a boat. The only problem you're going to run into if you're fly fishing from a boat is, and we're going to demonstrate this when I do fly casting here in a minute, sometimes you're going to have a lot of line at your feet. And nothing is more annoying than when you're in the middle of a cast and that line gets hooked on something in the bottom of the boat. So what I do is when I go down to, say, Arkansas and we fish out of a boat, or if I go to the Cumberland River and we're fishing out of a boat, I will take like a piece of carpet and just lay it down on the floor in front of me. And that way, when I go to cast, I don't catch it on anything. But yeah, you can fly fish out of a boat. Just look out for those little things that might catch your fly line.
And one more here real quick. When you were showing the fly.
Great, I love questions.
Yeah, I know. We've got
What?
a bunch of them here. So with those, with the flies that you were showing them a while ago, that have been, maybe you've got some that have been used multiple times and they lose their shape or the feathers are no longer fluffy. What can you do to take care of them?
If they are, let me see if I've had any that are just totally destroyed. This one missing one of the legs. I'll probably just tear it up and retie it. The smaller ones are fairly inexpensive. If you get into it, your first ones will not look so great. After a couple of them, you'll get the hang of it. Flies, if you get them from a good fly shop, they'll last you a pretty good while. You just like with bass fishing, you're gonna lose some lures. It's okay. They're not that expensive, so just go to the fly shop and replace it after the line starts falling. But some of my really, really destroyed flies, it's caught lots of fish, I'll just keep using them. Because think about it, when you have this bug on top of the water that can fly away, it just looks perfect, you're gonna just fly away at any time. But if you get that one that's been mangled up and just no way it can possibly fly off, that's the one the fish are gonna go for. If you have a bait fish, a bass chasing down a minnow, it's not going to go after the one that can swim really, really good. It's going to go after the one that looks like it went through a shredder. So it's okay. If the fly doesn't look perfect, it doesn't have to look perfect to catch fish. If you get into flying tying, keep using the ones that you tie first. They will probably still catch fish. Just go out there and enjoy catching something that you made. All right, we got to get to a few more things. Are there any more questions before we get to that?
Nope, I
No?
think we got all the
All right.
questions right now. Yep.
All right, so let's go to the whiteboard. There's one more thing we're going to talk about. It's the most important thing when it actually comes to fishing, and that is mending. Okay, it's not fly casting. A lot of people, they get so upset in the sport of fly fishing, they sometimes give it up just because they don't think they're good at casting. If you can cast 20 feet, you can catch lots of fish, especially in Kentucky. We've got lots and lots of waterways in Kentucky, lots of places to fish. If you can cast 20 feet with a fly rod, you'll catch lots of fish. But if you don't mend properly, and that's what we're going to talk about now, if you can't mend properly, you're not going to catch a lot of fish. All right, so let's go back to the whiteboard. All right, so I know Bob Ross, but I'm going to draw a little stream, and maybe I'll put a few trees in there, a cute little happy tree or something. But for the most part, it's going to be water. So we got our creek. We got this river that we're fishing. A lot of times, you don't have to worry too much about this if you're fishing still water. But if we're fly fishing, we tend to fish flies around places with moving water. So here's our river, okay? And we're going to say that the water in our river is going this way. Okay? Water's going that way. And we're going to put a cute little rock there. We're going to put a happy little boulder here. And we're going to put a nice little log here. Right? A little tree there. All right. When you first approach a river, what I like to tell people is get there a little early and just look at your water. If you will just watch the water for a few minutes, you'll notice a lot of fish. And maybe you'll see a fish come up right here. Well, that's great. Now you know exactly where to fish for that one fish, right? But there are some other places you want to look for too. If your water's going this way, there's a boulder right here. That big fat fish that you want to catch, well, he's really lazy, right? He did not get fat by doing a lot of workouts, right? If he's in this fast moving water that's going beside this rock, he's not going to get really fat. So what he's going to do is he's going to be fat and happy and lazy. And so here's our fish, okay? And he's going to hide behind that rock because the current is going to go like this around the rock. So it's going to be fast here. It's going to be slow where he's hanging out. So what he's going to do is he's going to hide behind this rock. And he's going to wait for that unsuspecting bug to just float to him, right? That bug in the water that he wants to eat, or that dead, dying fish, all right? It's not going to move a lot, all right? So when we fly fish, we want that fly to float as naturally as possible. We want our lure, our fly, to look just like food, right? So we want that fly to do exactly that. We want to go the same speed of the water, and we want it to drift toward that rock and then fade away. If we do that, there's a good chance we're going to catch that fish. But that becomes a problem. In fly fishing, we're always manipulating the fly line. We're doing that so that our fly at the very end of our line floats by the proper way. If it doesn't, they're less likely to eat it, okay? A little bitty bug that's in the water that's half the size of your pinky fingernail cannot swim up the water really, really fast. It can't dart to the side. It can't make big, long movements because it just can't do that physically. So what we want is we want that to float naturally down through there. We want to catch that lazy big fish. So we have to do what's called a dead drift. We want to drift the same speed as the water around it. So if you took an acorn or a sweet gum ball or something that floated in the water and you threw it in the water, you want that fly to do the exact same thing. That's going to be natural. You're going to catch a lot more fish. The problem comes when we fly fish, we want to fish to that and we're standing right here. We'll cast out there. If we cast to there, what's going to happen is the current is going to be pushing against this line. Okay, so here's our line. And what's going to happen is eventually, before it gets to this fish, this line is going to be right here. And it's going to have a big bow in it. And that fly is going to be right here and not right here where the fish can eat it. So if we don't do this thing called mending, we'll have no chance at catching that fish. All right, so what we do, instead of making our fly go like this, we want our fly to do this. In order to do that, we have to throw a mend in the line. So you made your original cast, okay? You cast up here to where it's in line with your fish. What you have to do now, in order to keep it from bending and pulling away from the fish, is we're going to throw just a little flick of line, and we're going to cause that line to, instead of doing this, do this. And what happens is, when that line, when that water is pushing on that line, when it gets down to here, it's straightened out. So that's all mending is. So most of the time when you're fishing, we want to go straight, we'll throw an upstream mend. So water's going this way, we're going to throw it upstream, we're going to give it a little loop so that when it gets to the fish, it's right where it needs to be and it's going the right speed. But what happens a lot of times is the water right here will be going pretty fast. The problem is when water hits this log right here is we get a little eddy and that water comes back this way. So in between us and the fish, we've got two different waters. We've got one water going this way and we've got one water going this way. So what we'll need to do is instead of throwing a mend this way, we'll throw a mend this way. Just give it a little mend. That way, when this water pushes on it, it still keeps it in line. Now it takes some practice, but if you'll just sit and look at the water, you can pretty much tell which way the currents are going. A lot of other good information to help you catch more fish is usually the water will tell you lots of stuff. Maybe you can see that boulder, right? Or you can see this log, and fish are going to be hanging out behind it, right? Especially if the water's moving. So we know the fish are going to be back there. But what will also happen is if you go to any creek or any river, you'll see lots of bubbles in between these seams. So if we have water that's moving like this and this, what will happen is you'll get these little bubble lines and bubble lines. That's where the fish is going to hang out. They're going to hang out around that bubble line because all the food in that river is being funneled to that one spot. So pay attention to that water and try to figure out where that fish is going to be. Sometimes it's not a physical feature, okay? Could be a rock, could be a tree, but what it could also be is pretend that we're underwater, okay? We're the fish. We've got this stream bed that's going like this, and then it just dips down. Well, down here, that fish is going to hide. Going to hide right behind the break in that bank because the water on top is going really fast. But the water down here is going really slow, okay? Maybe going up, it may be going down, but it's really slow. He can hang out there, not spend any energy, and he can just wait for food to go by. So a lot of times if you see a fish coming up to the surface and eating, what he's doing is he's just sitting in a hole in the bottom and waiting for food to come by. That's what makes fly fishing really, really good way to catch these fish. We can make our lure act a lot more like food than if you're using a spinning rod or bait casting rod, because the way we can mend that line, we can make our lure look more like food than sometimes you can with a bait casting rod or a spinning rod. We can catch more fish because one, we're using a bait that they can actually eat. Maybe these fish have never seen big, gigantic night crawlers floating down through there. Maybe they're used to eating something that's really, really tiny. They're really big fish. Well, if we're using something that looks like what they're eating, we're going to catch more fish. All right, so I'll try to explain mending a little bit more when we get out there, but we're probably running a little short on time. So I'm going to quickly go out and demonstrate a little casting first. Before we get out there, if it's unclear, this session's going to be recorded, so you can go back and look at it and watch it again. But go to YouTube, go to these big fly fishing websites, and they're going to have casting lessons on them. But if you can get down mending, it's going to help you a lot more than being the best caster in the world. So let me get my pole. I'm going to use this one right here.
Oh, sorry.
When we go outside, though, when you take a fishing pole outside and you're going through a doorway, the #1 killer of fishing poles is doorways. Break your pole down and make sure it never gets caught in ceiling fans or doorways. Now we can go out. Many of rods have died. So we'll go put these together. Pretty simple. You just line up these eyelets, okay, these guides. Make sure when you look down it, they're in line. All right, another trick we can use, and will save you a lot of headaches, all right? So back off this drag so I can pull the line out. So when you are lining a rod for the first time, okay, anytime you get to a stream and you're putting this together, get you out a bunch of line, okay? Get a bunch of fly line, just let it down on the ground. Let your drag back up a little bit. What you want to do is you want to take your line and double it over, make a loop, okay? Always do this. Always make this loop. Because if you just take the other end and you stick it through here, what's going to happen is you're going to get to the top where you can't reach, and then you're going to let go of this line, and the weight of this line is going to pull it all the way back through. You're going to have to start over again. So to save you headaches, make your loop. Put it in there. Doop. Doop. And like I said, your arms are not 9 foot long. You will have to probably move this line through here. You'll probably let go of it. But if I let go right now, it stops. And it's amazing. I don't have to do all that work over again. All right. When you are casting for the first time and you're practicing casting, never, ever, ever have a hook on there, okay? Forgot to mention this earlier, but when you go fly fishing, all the time, you want to have a pair of sunglasses because this little bitty fly is zooming past your head at 90 miles an hour, and I don't want to have anybody get a hook in their eye, okay? So wear a hat, wear a pair of polarized sunglasses. These are polarized sunglasses. They're pretty cheap at Walmart. But what polarized glasses allow you to do is it allows you to see through the water better. So polarized glasses are a must when it comes to fishing. All right, so we don't have a fly on there. We just got our line. When you start out casting, you might want to get on this side so you can see that line better. Flip over there. Okay. So when you start out, blow yourself out some line. And I just want you to wiggle it out like that. Okay, wiggle back and forth. Get that line outside of that rod. For the first couple times, you can just reach up here and pull down. Get that line out in front of you, okay? So we don't want a lot of line practicing. What I want you to do is I want you to imagine that I am a clock, okay? If I am a clock and I put my hand straight up in the air, that's 12 o'clock. Right here, according to my clock, would be 11, okay? Confusion earlier. This might be 1, this might be 11, doesn't really matter. But what I want to do is I want to stop my back cast here at 11. I don't want to start my front cast at 1, okay? If I pull my arm way back down to here at 3 o'clock, or way back here at 9 o'clock, it's going to be a mess. So when you are fly casting, we want to do 3 things. First thing we want to do is we want to put a bow in this rod. This rod, when it's bent, is called loaded, okay? It's loaded with potential energy. And we're going to use that energy to keep that fly line up in the air. The second thing we want to do is we want to make two casts. We want to make a back cast and a forward cast. On our back cast, it's just like if you were fishing with any other pole. Pull back to here, we're going to stop, and then we're going to go forward, okay? So back cast, forward cast. Back cast stops here about 11, stops here at 1. If you make a good acceleration to a stop, wait for that line to come back out, accelerate forward, stop here, you're going to be a good fly caster, okay? Some people say you got to lock your wrist, you got to keep your elbow in. It doesn't really matter. Casting a fly rod is really lazy. Nancy, are you listening? I want you to be really lazy. A lot of people, when they start out, they just whip it back and forth. Back and forth. That's going to lose you lots of flies, and you're not going to be a very good caster. So if you can make good hard stops and then accelerate out of them, you're going to be a really good caster. So you want that fly rod to bend. You want a good hard stop at 11. You want a real good hard stop at 1. So last thing you want to do is you want to make that line that fly line, while it's in the air, travel through a straight line. And you do that by stopping at 11 and 1, okay? So if I stop here and I stop here, that line's going to go like this. If I stop at 3 and I stop at 9, that line's going to make a big arc, and it's not going to be very effective. I'm going to end up in the trees and the bushes, and I'm going to end up in a pile of line in front of me. So when you go to grab this, grab it just like you were shaking somebody's hand or as if you were using a hammer, okay? Thumb goes on top. Don't squeeze the life out of it, okay? Just get a nice relaxing grip. Then you're going to take your trigger finger, and this is just practicing. You're going to take your trigger finger and just hold the line like that, okay? You don't want a big bow in front of you. You don't want it piled up. If there is a pile, you want that pile behind your finger, okay? So we're just going to start off with about 15 feet of line out in front of us just to get our casting now. We're going to hold the line like that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'll start my back cast, stop here. Start my forward cast in here. And this is really lazy. I can sit here, talk to you, go 1, 11, 1, 11, 1, 11. If I get to doing this, my line's going to go everywhere, okay? So I want to stop at 1, stop at 11, 1, 11. You do that, that is your basic cast. On your last cast, you're ready to deliver the fly, okay? What I'm doing right now is called false casting. When you're actually making your cast and you're putting that fly on the water, all you're going to do is on that front cast, you're going to lower your rod tip. When you do it right, it's going to go straight. That line on the ground is nice and straight. If you don't stop at 1 and you don't stop at 11, here's what happens. Be patient, okay? When you're fishing, you are casting. You want a hard stop at 1, hard stop at 11. If you do that, you'll be a really good fly caster. Doesn't matter about your wrist, doesn't matter about your elbow. I've heard a lot of people get confused about all that. Just relax, enjoy it. Fly casting, incredibly lazy. Fly fishing, incredibly lazy sport. So I like it. So stop at 1, stop at 11. Stop at 11, stop at 1. However your clock looks to you. 1, 11, 11, 1. That fly line's traveling a nice line. Now, just because a lot of people cast overhand, that's a good way to learn to cast. But if I draw a straight line with that fly line, I can cast in front of me too. And there's no hook on this, so Kaylin doesn't have to worry. She's not going to get hooked. But here is 1, here is 11. Here's 1, here's 11. So if I was casting, I had some trees up above me, didn't want to get stuck in there, I could go like this as well. Stop at 1, stop at 11. My fly line's going in a nice straight line. And again, on that last cast, I get to fly where I want it to. All I do is follow it to the water. Point the rod where I want that fly line to go, and that is your basic cast. Like I said, We don't have a ton of time, but we'll stay as long as you got questions. That is your basic fly cast. Go on to YouTube. Go on to these fishing websites, and they'll teach you how to cast. You can rewatch this video. There is one more cast, a little bonus cast that I want you to learn, and it's called a roll cast. And the reason we might use a roll cast is if we're sitting in the water, I'm facing where I want to fish. If there's a tree behind me or some weeds behind me that are going to catch my fly, obviously I don't want to make a back cast. So what I can do is I can do what's called a roll cast. So you'll have line on the water. And when your fly is out there, that's great, but you want to make another cast. So what you'll do is you'll slowly pull your rod back to the 1 o'clock position. And you'll see that that fly line kind of makes a D out of my pole and my line. It makes a cursive D. So you pull your line back to there. If we have something behind us, we can't make a back cast. So we just start here. Start here and make it forward. Okay? Not as efficient as our big cast, our standard cast, but a roll cast will save you if you're in a small creek or if you got something behind you. All right, I mentioned that mending. I want to mention it real early. So you cast it straight out in front of you. The water's going that way. So what I want to do is I just want to make a little C with my line forward. So I will mend upstream. If I want to mend downstream, all I got to do is make the C the other way. And now I'm downstream mending, okay? So if the water's coming this way, I want to downstream mend. If the water's going that way, I want to upstream, okay? Just try to make your fly, even if you need to, grab something on the bank, a little piece of wood, throw it in the water, see what it's supposed to do. Make your fly do that, and you'll catch lots of fish. All right, question time.
All right, DJ. So a question about the mending. What about just sending the fly further instead of adding a mend?
Okay, so if I send the fly further, I send the fly way over there. Well, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to talk loud so you can hear me from here. We got our lines going this way. Our river's going this way. The more line I have out, the more I need to mend because there's more water pushing against this line. So what happens was my fly was originally right here. But now my fly is way over here. So we're going to have to put more mends the more line that we have out. The best thing to do is actually to make shorter casts and maybe try to get closer to the fish that you're actually fishing for. You may have to walk down the bank a little bit. You may have to wade out in the stream a little further. But again, don't get too carried away. Once you get water up over your knees and closer to your waist, there's more water pushing on you too. A better chance you could fall. So make sure you stay safe. You can make longer casts, but once you get it out there, maybe to help you mend a little bit, you get it out there, you make your mend. But what I want you to do to make sure you can always sit the hook good on a fish is as it's going downstream, point your rod tip at the fly. One thing it'll do is it'll keep more line off the water and allow your fly to float more naturally. And it'll also take the slack out of your line. So when you do set a hook in fly fishing, most of the time all we do is raise the rod tip up. A lot of people, I see bass fishing that have been bass fishing for a long time and they switch to fly fishing real fast. They will send fish flying through the air, okay? We don't like that, okay? If you have a really, really big fish on and you rear down and set the hook, you have a chance to break your rod too. So make sure when you set the hook on fly, just raise it slightly up. All right, got any more questions or anything I can make more clear?
We got more questions. So
great. Love questions.
Are you supposed to let the line out as you move the rod back and forth?
Okay, so when you are letting line out, so you had originally that much line, okay? Maybe 15 feet of line. And now what you'll do is you'll strip out some more line because you want to go that much further. On your back cast, what you'll do is you will take your line in this hand, in your opposite hand you're not using for the rod. And what you'll do is when you get back to 11 o'clock and you make that good hard stop, all you'll do is slightly open your hand. If you don't, and you open your hand and you let the line go, you'll end up with a big pile in front of you. Okay, you don't want that. So you just make a circle is what I tend to do. Is I make a circle just like the OK symbol. And at that stop, I'll let more line go out. Once that line straightens all the way out, then I'll start my forward cast. You'll just go like this. You'll stop it with this hand. When you stop and that line straightened out, you stop with this hand, and then you'll go forward. Once you go forward, you have the right amount of line out. Let me get back here. So I'll open it up, open it up, open it up, and then I'll let it go. So now I have that much more line out there. There's building behind me. So let's turn this. There we go. So now I can let that line out. Stop, open it up, stop, open it up. And on that last cast, sometimes you can let it go. If you know you have just a little bit of line left, I'll let it go. But then what that causes is then you have to reach it with this hand to grab the line. So that way, if you do get a bite, it doesn't have just the reel to pull against.
He makes it look easy, doesn't he?
It sounds easy. It looks easy. It is easy, but you will struggle with it the first time. Don't get down. If you need help, you can email me, you can call me. We'll talk it out over the phone. The best thing to do is there is a ton of resources online. Go online, watch a casting demonstration online, and they'll probably clear a few things up.
Yeah, those hard stops are important. I'm just saying from experience.
Hard stops.
Hard stops.
Patient. Don't stop and then go. Stop and then go. No, really patient. It's a real lazy sport, Nancy.
Yeah, I was testing DJ's patience trying to teach me.
She's testing my patience, trying to be patient.
Is there a different rod materials, or is there something you look for in how those rods are made?
Most of the rods today are made out of graphite, just like any other fishing pole that you'll ever see in these stores. Back in the 70s and 60s, they used to make them out of not graphite, but fiberglass. And they're a little awkward to cast now. If you started out on this graphite rod, you'll probably never go to a fiberglass rod. It's starting to make a comeback because it allows for a little more action. This rod, being graphite, it can only bend a certain amount. Fiberglass rods, I could probably bend it all the way and touch end to end, and it probably wouldn't break. But with fly fishing, it does help to have a little stiffer rod, and graphite helps us to do that. If you're buying just one of those combo packs and it's really, really cheap one, like under 50 bucks, those rods will still be made out of graphite. But if you do get into it, you really enjoy it, getting a rod like this one's probably a $115 rod. You're going to notice a big difference in just the amount of castability and how much easier it is to cast this than one of the cheaper ones. But starting out, definitely we'll buy a combo pack just to get into the sport.
All right. Hey, DJ, so let's say you throw it out there and you don't catch a fish. How do you know when to start reeling back in?
All right, so I can do it this way. Which way is better for you to see it?
I go back out here.
Okay, so you're going back out here. So our original cast was straight out in front of us. Eventually, you're going to not mend anymore, and that fly may be way down there, okay? So it's downstream, our stream's going this way. Once we get to there, we're pretty much done. We think that the fish is going to be somewhere in here. So in order to make a good steady mend and keep that fly floating down just like it naturally would, it's better for us to make shorter distance, fish shorter distance, and then just walk further down the stream, as opposed to trying to mend and mend and mend. So if you go 20 yards downstream, what you'll do is you'll just hold it like this, let it come back, and then pick up your cast and do it again, or walk down and do another cast. So we don't want to cover way down there. The only time we might want to do that is if we are fishing one of those big streamers. Now, fish, they can move through the water, right? They can move through the water a lot better than an insect. So if we're using a big streamer, what I might want to do is I might want to cast downstream a little bit. This is in front of me, this is downstream a little bit. So that water is continually pushing it this way. And during streamer fishing, I might not want to mend it all. I might want the bait to be pushed downstream but coming toward me. I might even strip some of the line in to make it look like that fish is darting against the current, like a normal fish would. So whatever you're doing, you want to try to make whatever fly you have look like food. The more you can make it look like food, the more fish you're going to catch.
So do you make multiple mends after the initial cast?
It depends. If you have one water stream that is going the same speed pretty much the whole way, I would just make one mend. If I'm fishing really close to me, say I'm fishing 15 feet away from me, instead of mending, what I'll do is I'll do what they call high sticking. I'll put my rod tip way up here and I keep my arm up here. That way there's only like 2 feet of fly line on the water. So that's not much for the water to push against, and that fly tends to stay pretty close. Catch a lot of fish really close to you because you already have 10 foot of rod. Just raise it up. Now you only have 2 feet of line that water's pushing against.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I keep muting because the Bajas that come out on the lake down here, and I hear it's like thunder behind.
Oh, that's
me.
right. You're on the back porch.
I'm on. Yep. So when you go to crank the okay, let me say this again. Do we use the crank on the reel to retrieve the line for another cast, or just pile up the fly line at our feet?
Just pile it up at your feet for the most part. Most of the time, what'll happen is, I'm not going to hit you, I promise. All right, so I got my line out there, and I already have the amount of line that I want to make that same cast over again. So instead of reeling this up, yeah, I'll just pile it at my feet. There might not be much of it. Then what I can do is when it gets down there, what I can do is at the end of my run, the end of the cast, I'll just pick up and make that same exact cast over again. I didn't have to do anything with the reel. I can make the same exact cast over and over again till I know that fish hits. Or if he doesn't hit, then I'll just move on to the next fish. So yeah, you don't usually use the reel unless you get a really big fish on. So a lot of times, even when you catch a fish, if it's not going to be something that's going to pull a lot of drag, what I'll do is I'll just lock my trigger finger and strip that fish in until it gets close enough to me that I can just net it up. So all you would do is you would start here, you'd pick up, stop at 1, go forward, stop at 11. You can make the same cast over again without doing anything.
Nice. Well, you got to remember, for those of you kind of looking at going, how does he know all that? DJ's been doing this, what, 20-something years now?
I will be 35 this year. I've probably been doing it since I was 14. So yeah, I've been doing it a while.
Just a few years.
If you go out in your backyard and you practice this for an hour, 2 hours, you set you up a laptop and you watch a YouTube video while you're doing it, you'll have no problems picking up casting. It's a lot easier than it may appear to you right now, starting out, not ever holding a fly rod before. If y'all were here at camp, what I would be doing is I'll probably have 7 or 8 rods when you come to a bow, and I would be helping you cast while I'm actually explaining it to you. Makes it a lot easier. But for virtual, this is what we got to do.
All right, let's see. Other questions? Well, you got some people that all want to go fish right now, though. So
yeah, I want to go fishing right now,
up.
too. Aside from the fact it's probably going to rain here in a minute.
Yeah.
But
He keeps threatening us.
hey, I will fish in the rain as long as it's not lightning. Fishing in the rain is good too.
All right. So here at the end, I know we're pushing it on time, and we see a lot of familiar faces in the room right now. I'm here, and I did some of the campfire cooking. You got DJ here with the fly fishing. Courtney's right here beside me. She did the bow fishing. So if you all have thought of questions, maybe since doing some of our workshops together, our sessions together, we're here for the moment. If there's anything else you all want to talk about or questions you all might have, we appreciate your all's time, and we know we're over. So if you need to move on to your next session or whatever, that's cool too. But we thought we were all sitting here, we'd offer and say, hey, if there's anything else you all want to know, go ahead and ask while we're all still close enough to each other we can answer these questions for you.
I mean, I could talk about fishing all day.
Yeah, that's true. And we get Courtney starting on stories, Lord help us.
Some of those are made for video.
Yeah, awesome. Because yeah, someone's saying that they really understood your instruction, and they're ready just now to get out and practice a little bit.
Yeah, like I said,
Awesome,
don't spend
yeah.
a lot of money. Get into sport. Get used to casting. Then once you get really good at it and you catch a bunch of fish, then you might want to move up to a new rod. But I still have the first rod that I started out with. Still works. Still catches fish. Keep it in the truck just in case.
So we can practice our fly fishing, we can get out and shoot the bow fishing, and then we'll come back and eat over the campfire is what we're going to do.
Best week of camp food I've ever eaten.
What is the best fly to start with?
Depends on what you're fishing for and where you are at. If you are bass fishing, I would start out with what is called, or basically any kind of fishing. If you're fishing freshwater for bass, trout, bluegill, it's called a woolly bugger, or I like to call them woolly boogers. But woolly bugger is a crawfish imitation, and it will work just about anywhere there are fish and crawfish. Maybe a size 6 to a size 12 woolly bugger probably be the best fly I would start out if you just really wanted to hammer fish your first time you go out. But once you get into it and you start using different ones, you'll learn in that particular area which flies to use. If you're going someplace new, like when I go to new tri waters, I just got back from Montana, and what I'll do is I'll go onto a local fly shop's website, and they'll usually have what's called a hatch chart on there, and that will tell you what bug activity is in the water, and then you just get one that matches that. You end up catching lots of fish.
Insider tips right there. Oh, I want to know now, where did you go fishing in Montana?
Me and the wife just got back from Glacier, Montana, which is in the far, far, far northwest corner, about 30 miles from Canada. But we fished a lot of rivers. We fished the Yellowstone River, the Gallatin River, and a lot of little lakes up there. So that's where I came back from.
So if you haven't figured it out already, DJ is pretty serious about his fishing. All right.
If we go on a vacation, I'll find places to fish along the way. Yes.
All right. Hey, we appreciate your all's time. Oh, what camp is DJ at? We are all sitting here at Camp Curry, which is where we wish all of you were with us this weekend. But we're all from the western part of the state, and Camp Curry is our Fish and Wildlife camp here in the far, far west. Behind me, if you've been hearing the boat noise, I've been trying to mute it so you wouldn't. That's Kentucky Lake behind me. So we're right on the shoreline of Kentucky Lake is where we're at right now. So, all right, folks, we've used up so much of your time. We appreciate you sticking with us. Hopefully we gave you a lot of good information. I think there may be one more session for you all, some of you for this afternoon. We hope you've enjoyed your weekend with us. We've enjoyed spending some time with you all. So from Camp Curry, guys, we want to thank you all much for sharing your time with us, and hopefully we'll get to see each other in person very, very soon.